Red Badge of Courage, Chapter 7. Remember that Henry has just run away from his second, I guess, conflict, and thought that his regiment had lost and everybody was retreating with him. Come to find out, he passes an artillery brigade that's still firing, and then he comes within earshot of a general who is excited that the line held. And so Henry has just realized that he's fled, and his regiment did not indeed flee, only a small portion of them, and that they held, and now he is, he's away from them, and he doesn't know how to get back to them, and now his internal struggles really start. He's reached sort of a climax or a conflict that he's going to have to resolve. So the youth lowered his head as if he had been discovered in a crime. They had won after all. The crazy line had remained firm and come to victory. He could hear cheering. He stretched his neck and looked in the direction of the fight. A yellow cloud lay on the treetops. From beneath it came the sound of gunfire. Deep cries told of an advance. He turned away, shocked and angry. He felt that he had been wronged. He had run, he told himself, because certain death approached. He had done well in saving himself because he was a little piece of the army. He had decided it was the duty of every piece to save itself, if possible. Later, the officers could fit the pieces back together again and make a battle line. If none of the little pieces were wise enough to save themselves from death at such a time, where would the army be? So he's rationalizing his choice to run away, if it was even a choice. It was all clear that he had proceeded according to the very correct and admirable rules. His actions had been sensible, full of wisdom. Question, had they? Was it the sensible thing to run away? I mean, I guess maybe. War is completely nonsensical. It doesn't make sense on an individual level to stand there with bullets flying all over the place and possibly die. Like on an animal level, every animal would flee from a situation like that. And when Henry was participating actively in the combat, he relinquished his humanity and became an animal. And when he fled, he relinquished his humanity and became an animal. And it seems like he gets in these fight-or-flee situations, and he one time chose one and one time chose the other, but inevitably he comes back to his humanity, comes back to his senses afterwards, and that's where we're at now. And he's trying to rationalize his behavior, as we all do. Do you ever do something that in retrospect you wish you hadn't? But then what do? You rationalize it. You come up with reasons for why you did it, and you try and convince yourself that it was the right thing to do, even if it maybe wasn't. And that's where Henry is right now. Thoughts of his companions came to him. The thin blue line had taken the blows and won. He grew bitter about it. He had been overturned and crushed by their lack of wisdom. They had held the position with when clever thinking would have shown them that it was impossible. I mean, think about that's an ironic statement, right? It was possible. They did it. So, Henry's a thoughtful guy. He's an introspective guy. He likes to think of himself as very intelligent, but here he is sort of like severely overthinking things and trying to make incorrect things sound correct to himself. He, the wise man who looks far into the darkness, had run away because of his superior mind. He felt a great anger against his companions. He knew it could be proved that they had been fools. He wondered what they would remark when later he appeared in camp. His mind heard wild laughing. Their dull minds would not enable them to understand his sharper point of view. He began to pity himself fiercely. He had been badly used. He was crushed beneath the feet of an iron injustice. He had proceeded with wisdom and sense, only to be defeated by hateful circumstances. A dull animal-like revolt against his companions, against war, against fate grew within him. He walked along with his head down, his brain suffering and full of despair. When he looked up, trembling at each sound, his eyes had the expression of a criminal who thinks his guilt and punishment are great and who can find no words. So despite the fact that he's trying to convince himself through thoughts that what he did was right and, it's not really his fault, you get a sense from these last lines that he knows that it is his fault, and he feels guilty about it. He compares himself to a criminal, and he thinks he's guilty and needs to be punished. He went from the fields into a thick forest, as if determined to bury himself. He wished to stop hearing the shots, which were to him like voices. Now, this is something Crane does literarily that's worth thinking about. There's sort of fields and forest, and the forest is a place of hiding. If you're in the fields, you're out in the open, and you can see and be seen. And it's like Henry doesn't want to see or be seen. He also doesn't want to think about what he's done. He's trying to hide from it, both physically and mentally. And this entering into the forest sort of represents a phase that he's going to go through in his processing of his own cowardice. And so we want to look at that. I think also smoke is another thing that obscures. So we want to look at things that the forest and the trees that can obscure you. That's a natural obscuring. The smoke from the gunfire that obscures you. That's something that's unnatural. But you know, I'll shut up. I'll keep reading. I could go on about symbolism and stuff, maybe a little too much. He went from the fields to a thick forest, as if determined to bury himself. He wished to stop hearing the shots, which were to him like voices. After a time, the sound of rifles grew faint, and the large guns roared in the distance. The sun, suddenly apparent, shone among the trees. The sound of death was far away. It seemed now that nature had no ears. We capitalize nature like it's a person. The scene gave him assurance. This was a place holding life. It was the religion of peace. I think it's interesting he calls nature the religion of peace. There's a contrast between humanity and nature. It's almost like human beings are unnatural. We're not a part of nature. And that's sort of a Victorian idea. So, let's see. It would die if its calm eyes were compelled to see the blood. He believed nature to be a woman, this is Mother Nature, by the way, with a deep unwillingness to see suffering. Chapter 7 was so short. Yeah. I'm going to pause it and start chapter 8.